talk about Chapter 2.
Chapter 2 is all about perception. Perception is at the heart of communication. It's this active process that we engage in when we communicate with people. And as we become aware of our perception, we can really make great improvements into how we communicate with each other. Perception involves a 3-step process. The first step is going to be selection. Then we can move on to organization. And finally, we can look at interpretation. When we talk about selection, there's simply so much in our world. There's so much going on around us that we cannot focus on everything. We can only absorb so much. And so selection talks about how we choose what to process and what to take in. Now we can look at the self-fulfilling prophecy in this step, and this theory says that we will perceive what we expect to perceive. Next, we can move on to step 2, an organization. As we look at organization, we can study the constructivism theory, which says we're going to process information into certain categories, schemata. And your book mentions 4 different schemata. Those are the stereotype and prototype, the self-constructs, and finally using a script to predict what someone will do and what course of action will follow. After we look at organization, then you will look at interpretation, which is the last step in the perception process. When you look at interpretation, you are assigning meaning to all the information that you have gained in the conversation, in the communication. And attributions, your book talks about 4 attributions or why something has happened. Those are locus, stability, scope, and responsibility. And then you can also study self-serving bias, which is the theory that if something positive has occurred, I was the reason. And if something negative has occurred, then it was somebody else's fault, and I remove myself from that responsibility. Then your chapter moves on to the influences in our perception, and this is where we can really self-reflect and become aware of our perception and how we can change things to become better communicators. We are all influenced by our particular culture and the ideas that have been kind of pre-programmed into us as we were growing up. Standpoint theory is what we want to aim for in realizing that there are different layers and levels to each culture and different types of people, and we want to try to move away from those stereotypes that we have used before, and we want to move into more of a person-centered perception where we look at each person in communication as individual and unique, and then we can really stop and listen to what they have to say without all the external noise that we've built up around that conversation. I guess that wouldn't be external noise, that would be internal noise. And then your book ends the chapter with 2 tips. Don't mind read someone. Don't assume that you know what they're going to say and what their message is, because you'll get yourself into trouble. Instead of that, try to have some empathy. Put yourself in other people's shoes when you're in communication with them or receiving their message or even sending messages to them. And then you'll be a more sympathetic person, and you'll be able to focus on their message and remove a lot of obstacles, and you'll be able to get more done as a communicator. I hope you enjoyed Chapter 2 as you work through it this week, and I hope this mini lecture was a little helpful too.